I come from a legal background. I was a litigator for nearly 25 years before feeling a call. And when I say a call, I didn't quite know what it was. I found when I stopped to pause and think, well, what is this call that I'm feeling? Having been a lawyer for nearly 25 years, and I got a real sense of. I looked at what I was doing as a lawyer, and I noticed that I'd actually been doing a lot of charity work for free in the last maybe 4 or 5 years before sort of coming to these feelings of where am I, what am I doing in relation to God, and how am I responding to God in the world. And I gave up law as a result of that, not quite knowing what the next move was going to be. So that was a really scary time, not just for me, but for everybody around about me. It was like, whoa, what's he doing? You know, because I couldn't really answer that in the moment, you know. Um, but uh, but as time went by, I was introduced to people, and the conversation started, and somebody said, "Well, have you ever thought about candidating for ministry?" A superintendent over in Tynedale, who's since retired, he turned to me and he said, "Oh, you are a presbyter in your call, in your inner voice of calling. It sounds like you're describing and I didn't really know what that was, and I didn't know what it meant. And so all the conversations followed from there. And I have to say, it is the most incredible and humbling experience because I feel that that question of when I stopped law, and well, just before I stopped law, and I was thinking, what's my relationship with God really all about? And I get to wake up every day thinking about God, where God might be calling me this particular day. And it's bound up in those things that one identifies with God, whatever it might be, and it's different for every person. We will have a different sense of response. I used to go to Sunday school in the 70s. I think it was just a kind of glorified playground for parents to throw you at, give them a Sunday morning off kind of thing, you know. And I would just wander across to the church and then enjoy the Sunday school and then walk home. And it was in those journeys between church and home that I kind of began to feel the presence of Christ in a very simple and sort of a very clear way because I can still, I mean, I've got my testimony service coming up quite soon, and it's something that's never left me. That sense of presence. I mean, I would be, walking past the ruins of Elgin Cathedral in the summertime, and I would just lie down in the grass and just look up at the sky and see listen to the birds and the river running by, and it was just a very intense experience of encounter. And it was a conversational. It was one of these. It was a conversational encounter. Um, but over the years, sorry, by conversational encounter, I mean I would talk to Jesus as if people, my mother would hear me saying, and she would say, "Well, who are you talking to?" And I'd be like, "Well, Jesus, of course." But over the years, when I went into law at Edinburgh, um, things recede. You kind of you're caught up in study, you're caught up in pressures of day-to-day life. I had some real challenges as a teenager, home life challenges, and all of that noise, if you like, kind of overtook that sense of conversational presence. Um, and but it never really goes away. That's the joy of that's the joy of faith. I mean, it's the joy of the spirit. It just doesn't leave you. It's so enriching being around people of God. And I had, if you played that back to me 3, 4 years ago, I'd have just laughed because it just would, I just wouldn't have understood that, far less actually live that reality. In terms of growth, it's enabled me to trust God more, uh, and uh, and I'm learning that there's a real joy in community. And it doesn't really matter who is part of that community, because it's held together by the Spirit, and that's really really exciting because when that happens, and I see groups within the churches that I'm sort of working with, responsible for. um, I see groups working so well, and I learned so much from these groups because people have been they've been in the churches for a long time and they know each other and they know the dynamics of each other's relationships in a way that I don't. And I've found that really enriching, and it's deepening my relationship with God, in a way that I wouldn't have understood before, far less living that reality now. And the other thing that's happened is that I've begun to understand the utter centrality of prayer and reading scripture. I mean, I've always known it to be a kind of truth, and I've tried to do it. And then, as I say, when I was a lawyer, you just, oh, I'm so busy, I can't read scriptures today. I'm too busy. I've got a big day tomorrow. I'm too tired. But actually, that's the wrong way around. And you, and the centrality of prayer and scripture, from all things grow from that. All of our kind of group relationships, personal relationships. And I'm finding this really, really exciting. You know, as I say, I've been around the block a few times and there's so much more to learn. And it's being open to the presence of God, the presence of the Spirit that enables us to keep changing and keep growing through it all. And it's amazing. It's an amazing experience, very humbling one and an incredibly blessed one as well. But you have to go through the challenges to get to that space. It's a bit like hill walking. If you're going to climb 6 Monroes in a day, you've got to be ready to get some blisters and maybe have a limp at the end of it, you know. But the rewards are utterly amazing, you know. Uh, yeah.